I just hope that women remind themselves that you've got to keep paying it forward. You've got to do this, create the same safe spaces for your colleagues, create empathy for other women as well, create career trajectories for other women. Are we doing that? Are we not doing that? I don't know. It's a question mark.
A second generation entrepreneur, an organizational development expert, and a very respected voice in the world of people strategy. So happy to have you. How you chose to become a second generation entrepreneur?
You know, I have enjoyed this journey only because I was allowed to be who I was. Legacy to me meant carrying values along. If you take it as pressure, then it's always going to feel like pressure.
So, there's a boomer, there's a millennial, there's a Gen Z. And I always notice that no two generations is happy with one another.
That's so sad. The form may have changed, but substance is pretty much the same. Understand the substance, in my view.
What is your take on mental health? What do you think we should be doing to improve the mental health?
We talk about well-being and meaning a lot more. In the 80s and 90s, people didn't talk about well-being.
Hardly.
It was hardly spoken of. But that didn't mean that it didn't exist. I think ego and insecurity are always seen in a negative tonality. That's not the case.
People don't leave companies, they leave managers.
False.
Hi, and welcome to the We Women Project. Today, we are in the company of Purvi, Sheth, who is a second generation entrepreneur, an organizational development expert, and a very respected voice in the world of people strategy. She is associated with number of top Indian companies and helped them navigate through leadership development, culture building, and organizational transformation. She also conducts a very interesting and inspiring program called the License to Lead, which focuses on mentoring women in the workplace. In her downtime, she stirs up some magic in her project called the Happy Kitchen. So happy to have you and talk to you about your life, Purvi. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me with us. Thank you so much.
So before we get started, we'll do something called the Leadership Lie Detector.
Oh my God, okay.
I'm going to give you a one-liner,
okay,
and you're going to tell me true or false, or yes or no, whatever that suits you.
Okay.
Okay. So we start with the first one. People don't leave companies, they leave managers.
False.
The second one is attrition is all about incorrect hiring.
False.
Longevity is very important for a successful career.
True.
If there is a underperforming resource, it is usually because of their skill.
False.
Loyalty over performance.
False.
The last one, culture is a myth. It seldom contributes to your organization building.
False. You cannot ask HR that question, can you?
So we have a lot to delve into. With that introduction to what Purvi does, she is, carries forward the legacy of a company called Shilputsi that was created in 1978 and incorporated by her mother, Pratibha Sheth. And I think, quite remarkable in those times when, women as entrepreneurs were so limited and doing something in the HR space completely unthinkable.
Absolutely.
So my question to you, Purvi, is when you were growing up, how did you see this build and what impact did it have on you? Or, what did you draw from it?
So it's a lovely question. I love answering this question if anyone ever asks me. It's, first of all, on my mother. She was, like I said, a trailblazer, somebody who she was a dynamite of a woman. She was full of energy and raring to go, and quite unstoppable. But what was very interesting was she started this at a time when all of this was relatively unknown. And she was very convinced of her beliefs, and she went through a lot to make sure she reached a certain, now, whether that was toilets in factories that were non-existent at that time for women, walking across in the rain to just find a toilet for herself, or to just, kind of make a mark. And I remember she used to tell the story all the time that she would walk into an office and the gentleman stood up and said, I thought a consultant was coming. This is a woman. And he couldn't believe that they could be one and the same. And she found that so funny. She used to double up in laughter around it. But because of that, I think we grew up, and because both my parents brought us up in this way where, first of all, work and home had very few boundaries, because both were HR, both my father subsequently joined Shilputsi, and work and home had really few boundaries. Today, people who are chairmen and CEOs of some of the most successful companies in the world used to be over to our home for career counseling at 8 o'clock at night, having dinner, whatever we were having. So that was the way we were brought up, to say, first of all, be grateful that you have work. There was no fear of hard work. So you just worked all the time, and it wasn't an anomaly. So there was no 9 to 5, 5 to 9 boundary. So you had fun when you could, and you enjoyed your space when you could, but you just worked when you had to. So that was how we were brought up. I think the other thing that was very interesting when we were being brought up was around saying ambition is your purpose. It's about your purpose. So we never talked about how much money was being made, for example. My parents always said, we did this. This is what we achieved. So there was a lot of achievement motivation around us as we grew up, for my sisters and myself. And I think that was the environment that was very inspiring for all of us.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. That actually brings me to the question on, how you chose to become a second generation entrepreneur. And I want to ask you this, Purvi, also from the fact that, there are a lot of children who struggle on deciding whether to join a legacy business. And so what was it like for you? And how did you navigate that decision for yourself?
For me, first of all, there was no pressure that you've got to do this, or everybody was given options, opportunities, and said you could. I started my journey wanting to be a journalist. And I thought, I'm going to change the world, but that didn't happen. I realized very quickly that I think to change the world, there was going to take a lot more time, and that journalism was something I enjoyed, but as a job, it wasn't giving me the satisfaction. So I did it for a very short while, and then I used to intern at Shilputsi while I was in college. So I went back to my mom saying, now that I've graduated, would you take me in? And she said, sure, I would. But you're starting right at the bottom. And that's how I started, absolutely at the bottom, writing envelopes to candidates, requesting them to update their resumes. So that was my first real assignment, sitting pretty much on the outskirts of the office. But as I went along, and I just enjoyed this space so much. I just enjoyed working. I enjoyed the work I was doing. And suddenly it just became my calling. So it was not. As far as legacy businesses are concerned, and since you asked the question, my view is that if you take it as pressure, then it's always going to feel like pressure. And I think legacy to me meant carrying values along of Shilputsi. It wasn't about the sameness. My father did something, he was specialized in a certain area. My sister was specialized in another area. My mother was specialized. Each of them did different things, and today I'm doing a little bit of everything that they did, and then I'm doing my own thing. So my father sat on boards, my mother didn't. Today I sit on some boards. My mother did a lot of training. I do a fair amount of training myself. So it just depends on who you want to be, and I was allowed the choice to mold Shilputsi in that way, the way I wanted to. So that was the other privilege I had. But to me, legacy is really about values and carrying on values, not the sameness that's been built out. So that's my advice for people.
Thank you for that. So you beautifully touched upon, because this is something that kind of struck me as well when I was going through your journey, that you have built a very independent, a brand for yourself outside of Shilputsi. And that must have taken effort, courage, and a certain degree of, knowing what you want to do, how you want to do it, etc. So do you have any takeaways on how you can be an individual? It doesn't just mean legacy business. Like in any situation, right? You create your own individual space and build a company as well simultaneously.
I have enjoyed this journey only because I was allowed to be who I was. Never had I needed to say I'm an imposter here, or position or posture. If I don't know something or can't do something, I will not, and nor will the firm. So we actually got out of certain areas which were not areas of specialization for me, saying this is not something that we can do very well, and if we cannot excel, we will not do it.
And that would mean a conversation with your parents and coming to the table and taking a decision?
Yes, absolutely. And they would be on site with it. The beauty about consulting as well is that each individual brings their capability and can work to that capability. But yes, I would have some of these conversations and they'd say, sure, if you don't think you can, because they said, you've got to carry it forward. Our journey will be coming to an end in some time, but you've got to carry it forward. So you do what makes you comfortable.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
They were very liberal parents, I have to say.
Yeah, and I think that also creates magic. You know, that the freedom
absolutely
makes you go and experiment and build something more beautiful.
Absolutely. The beauty of legacy businesses is, and since you were talking about it, is that you get a framework and you get a foundation. Right? That's the fun part about having a legacy business. You have something to go by. You also get guardrails. This is what we don't do, because like I was telling you earlier, the values that we talk about, right? So you have your framework, you have a foundation, you have your guardrails. Then what you go out there and make of it is up to you. And that's the benefit of the legacy business. But yeah, that's just my view. And I think it's great fun.
Beautiful. But I'm still going to push you and ask you, any pressure points?
Of course there are, because if it doesn't come from, first of all, it does come from within. You're always saying, here's a benchmark, right? So we're always benchmarking. And B, you're always putting pressure on yourself saying, I have to be as successful. And those measures of success might be traditional measures of success that don't work anymore. So I have an analogy, and I say this, that, for example, if you're Sunil Gavaskar's son or your Amitabh Bachchan's son, right? The measures of success are something, but times change and the measures of success change. And if you don't put that pressure on yourself, you'd be fine. But if you put that pressure, chances are you'd find it hard. So the idea is not to put the pressure, but of course there are pressures. The pressures from society, there are pressures from people who are watching. If your business is listed, there are pressures from analysts. So there are pressures, and it's hard. It's not all easy and rosy.
So how we navigate it, how clear we are in the head of what we want as an outcome could be.
Absolutely. And how secure we are on saying, I will chart my path, and if somebody doesn't think that's as good, that's all right. That's all right. But this is my journey to take. And my destination to meet. So as long as, and your parents' journey was different, and their motivations might have been different.
Absolutely. Yeah. So given Shilputsi focuses on personality, personal and organizational development, what was your kind of, say, aha moment when, working with Shilputsi, you said that this is my moment of personality development, or this is my change?
I think it's over a period of time. I think there was no one particular moment. What I'm proud of, right, today is that my mother's first client, one of her first clients, big client, and when my father joined her in 1990, his first big client, they had come in at their very different points in time. Then they both the clients had gone off. We were not working with them. They've come back and we're now working with them for the last several years.
Wow.
So for me, the moment of pride is that my mother's first client and my father's first client are still clients of Shilputsi Consultants.
That's big.
And that, I think, for me is my what pushes me forward. To say we've built legacy of trust, we've built relationships, and we've So we work with excellence. So we do not compromise on that. And I think these three things make the magic. So carrying that forward has always pushed me forward.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Purvi. So we'll delve into the next section, which, is going to be all about human capital, because I think that's where your expertise lies. So today, actually, the workforce operates with multi-generational. And they've termed us all different things. So, there's a boomer, there's a millennial, there's a Gen Z. And when we sit on a lunch table, I always notice that no two generations is happy with one another.
That's so sad.
In an organizational framework. So where do you think this is stemming from, and how do you think we can, what should we be doing to make it a more all-encompassing environment, learning to, cross the generational bridges?
Yeah. I think 2-3 things. I think one is, first, understand that every generation is vulnerable in their own way. So behind the bravado, behind the I know it all kind of look, there is a vulnerability, there is a fear, there is an insecurity. And learn to understand that instead of going with what's on the surface. So go a little beyond the surface. And I think that's where a lot of leaders and managers struggle, because there is a certain, and this is the difference between form and substance, right? The form may have changed, but substance is pretty much the same. Understand the substance, in my view. Don't go by the form. Somebody's coming in, walking in, calling you by your first name, sitting very comfortably in front of you and say, oh, when we were 20, we never did that. Sure you didn't, but this is all form. This is all presentation. Substance is the emotion, the insecurity, the fears, the motivations, pretty much the same as when you were 20 years old. So learn to distinguish between form and substance, to sum it up.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So one thing that, I recently read was that the aspiration set is changing. In terms of, there's money, meaning, and well-being. If we put that as 3 cohorts. And maybe for the generation of scarcity, money was very important and well-being came somewhere below the cohort. But increasingly, it's shifting to meaning and well-being more, being predominant, to culminate into happiness.
I think we've got to look at it in context. You're right that we talk about well-being and meaning a lot more. In the 80s and 90s, people didn't talk about well-being and meaning. It was hardly spoken of. But that didn't mean that it didn't exist. So it's not that people in the 80s didn't talk about meaning and purpose. It was just articulated in a different way and experienced in a different way. Today, a young person may say, can I have it clearly laid out for me? What's the purpose of this? What's the meaning behind what I'm doing? I want well-being. I want my time off for it. But it happened generations over. Everyone, if you go back to some of the industrialists who started, what was the purpose behind Jamshedpur, right? There was an altruism right there. But I think the articulation of some of these things have changed. But in my opinion, again, this has existed for generations.
And what has driven the change in the articulation? If it is only articulation?
I think just a little more awareness, a little more openness of society to talk about it as openly as we do, a little more acceptance around talking about it. So people did this even earlier, they do it now. We just talk about it more because I think A, we've got the better vocabulary for it, and B, I think social media has amplified some of this.
Right.
So there is an amplification to it as well.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So when we're on this topic, Purvi, I'm going to just touch upon just one more thing, is that, there was a global workforce report that, that kind of seemed to indicate again that there was a thriving population, there's a struggling population and a suffering population. While I was trying to figure out, what's the difference between a struggling and a suffering, I think, the notches were different. Right. But what struck me was that in South Asia, while the thriving percentage is about 19%, Globally, it is about 33%, and the suffering is about 9%. Here, people acknowledging that they're suffering through their day-to-day life is about 21%. So, and similarly, there was one more parameter that spoke about daily sadness. People who experience daily sadness, that was also a significantly high number. I mean, somewhere in the 20s, which was way higher than the global index.
Sad.
I know. It was painful to read. While India in South Asia, I think, did much better than the other neighboring countries.
Right.
And on the engagement score, we did very well. People were engaged and wanting to work, etc. But this kind of stood out. We just spoke about awareness. We just spoke about, it being accentuated, and because there is an openness to talk about it. What is it? What is this attributed to? Or is there a lot of pressure that, the young people are carrying, we are carrying?
There are multiple perspectives to this one, okay, as I see it. I think, first of all, South Asia, we have countries that are very small, struggling economically, and therefore, clubbing it all together might be a bit unfair, in my view. I think in India, we have a very large population. We're not developed everywhere and across homogeneously in the country. The country is, as large as you can get. So you have challenges in pockets of the country even today. Well, living in Bombay can be a struggle just in itself, right? And somebody who's moved from the outside, like some of my colleagues have, find Bombay a struggle, and that could lead to the sadness that we talked about, because it's not easy. It's not an easy city. But having said that, I think struggles are going to are a little bit more of part and parcel of the South Asian challenges of economics and existence overall. So you're bound to have those numbers there. I mean, I've just come back from a first world country, and it's a different life, right? It's a different life. Everything is different. And you don't see young people struggling the way that you would see them here, whether it's taking a train to somewhere, whether it's just being stuck in traffic, being stuck in floods, whether your house is leaking. You don't have that in a lot of countries that probably are being benchmarked. So I'm not surprised that there is a struggle, that there is a sadness, but we've got to acknowledge it and see what can we do to alleviate that. And sometimes you ask the question, sometimes, yes, it does come from within. A constant comparison, a constant FOMO, all of that does manage to creep in and then make you sad that I'm not in as good a space. I think the one thing as a population, and I'm not saying this is a generation thing, but I think as a population is a lack of gratitude. And I think that is something that we've got to build. We've got to be more grateful. There is a certain lack of gratitude. You've got everything, but we're just not grateful. How many times do we hear people saying, I'm thankful for, versus how many times do we hear people complain about things? So I think that has to culturally change, especially in a country like India, where we've now come a long way.
So many hurdles.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, what is your take on mental health, and what do you think we should be doing to improve the mental health index, or, how people feel about themselves?
And I think the first step is to recognize if you are facing, and I think all mental health specialists will tell you that. I'm not a mental health specialist per se, but just from my experience, I think the first thing is to recognize that you're in a difficult situation, that you're facing a mental health challenge. The second stage is, of course, to go out and get the help. A lot of people recognize it and think that they could perhaps rectify it on their own. I don't think that works. I think you've got to, if you have a mental health issue, you've got to really go out, and you've got to be able to distinguish between what is mental health or a temporary downer, right? And be able to understand your own behaviors and say, no, this is serious versus this is just a bad day, right? And I think sometimes those lines get a little blurred. And that's where there's this pushback that people have on mental health. But I think we've got to recognize it. We've got to go find help. And the key is to be resilient and come back. I think you've got to be able to bounce back. And to me, that's very important as well, that you have a challenge, you work on it. It may take time. There's no question that it may take a few months. It may even take a year. It may take longer. But how do you bounce back? I think resilience is very important. And to me, my advice to people would be, please go out and get the help and work that towards coming back, not just nurturing your down, but the fact that you can come back and do something with yourself.
And how is this resilience built, Purvi?
Tough question. I think a lot of resilience has got to do with your inner self, how much you speak to yourself, how much you tell yourself, I'm okay. I think you've got to be able to take things in their stride and just say, I'm going to come back and I will come back strong. My view, again, it's absolutely fine to be vulnerable. You should be vulnerable. That makes you human. But to be able to say, while I'm vulnerable, I also have an inner core strength in myself that will bring me back. And that generally comes from within. It's very hard to attribute it to your ecosystem and to people around you. Yes, that helps. That helps when you have positivity around you or you have people around you to support you. But ultimately, it's about yourself and what you say to yourself.
So the inner work has to be done to pull yourself up.
It has to be done. And which is why sometimes the help you get is also important, because that will let you have those conversations with yourself.
Absolutely.
To come back.
Absolutely. Let's look at talent acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
And, is it an art or a science, Purvi?
It's both, in
Okay.
my view. It's both
I'd
in
love
my
to
view.
hear more.
So I'll give you an example of what happened recently. We were working on I think my team was working on a position and they found a great candidate, very senior person, and two candidates. And the client interviewed, my team was interviewing. I was the last one to interview, and after I interviewed the candidate that everyone had liked more over the other one, I said, I think there's a challenge here. I think this person has a personality challenge, and this person is probably a very angry person.
No.
Right? And my team was ready to sort of kill me, but saying, now at the end of the process, you've put this in there. And but more importantly, they said, how and what, and I said, look, these are some of the indicators I had, and that was the art of it. But we went back and we said, we're going to validate this scientifically, and we did a psychometric test, and we got validated answers that led to some of the so I think you've got to, when you're looking at talent acquisition, it is a bit of art to just understand, and you have to read between the lines. You've got to understand a little deeper, and that's the art. And then you've got to validate that with specific experiences, specific data that you can get, and then select the person you want.
Does this art build with experience? Just comes out of sheer meeting thousands of people and...
A little bit. I think a little bit. And I think a little bit of thinking, being more empathetic, understanding people, behaviors, not reacting to, again, the surface. Most of us react to what's on the surface, what someone's saying. But really to go back and think a little deeper to say, where did that come from? So I think it comes not just with experience, but it comes with this innate need to think beyond the surface and to look beyond the surface. I think what's happened is that over time, with so many things going on in the world, we have so little time that we're very quick to judge.
Yeah.
And art, as you know, a painting can't happen in a day. So for art, you need to have time. And so those who are willing to spend the time will get great at the art.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Purvi, for that. There's another thing that's often now spoken about quite a bit, that the traditional form of education is kind of losing its purpose or losing its ground. And what's going to survive in the world or in the future is going to be skills. And acquisition of skills is going to differentiate one over the other. Your views?
Skills is important, especially at the beginning of your career. Skills are very important. Since I love to cook, I'm going to give you an analogy of food. Skills is like the masalas and herbs you have in your pantry. They're ingredients. What you do with them is very important. How they come together, and can you use everything that's in your pantry and put it all together? No, you cannot, right? So some days, for some things you'll use some, and for something else you'll use another. But the art again is into saying, how will I take these skills and make them work for me? And I think that is very important. So I think skills are important. You need to have the ingredients, so you need to acquire skills. But it's no point having a pantry full of skills where you can do nothing with it, or you don't know how to use them. So you get the skills you need and focus on them and build them and keep building. And skills is not finite. It's, they keep growing, they keep building, and they build out in various ways. I think there's this whole rush to acquire multiple skills all at once. You don't need to do that. You focus on a few skills. As you go along, that will just multiply on its own, because there'll be something else you build on top of that. So the rush to acquire too many skills, in my opinion, is not needed. Perhaps focus on how you're going to use these skills and make them stronger and better.
So choose your ingredients wisely, whether it's external, internal, whatever, and make something out of it.
Make something out of it.
Right.
Make something that's meaningful to you. Don't keep comparing. Don't keep wondering whether you did. Don't second guess yourself. And as the famous Steve Jobs goes, the dots will connect. So it's okay. Acquire experiences. They might be very diverse. They might be very different. There's so much neurodiversity now in all companies. You will find that.
Everybody will find a little space.
Yeah, they'll find a space.
So there's this other thing. I mean, when you talk about people, a cohort joining together, but some doing better than the other. And very often I get two terminologies that's thrown at us, or, in general, is energy and proactiveness. So I hear it so much at least. How do you see it play out in people?
I think they're extremely important, both energy and proactiveness. Take any profession, right? Whether it's politics, whether it's sports, whether it's medicine. Where do you not need these two, right? So I think while they're words that have been used a lot, they're very important in my opinion. And energy can be in different ways. Not everybody is about the physical energy, or it could be emotional energy, it could be mental energy, it could be physical energy. But having a certain energy to yourself, what is your energy, is very important.
If you have to give a dimension to energy, how will it, what will the attributes be, or how will a person with high energy play out in a workplace?
I think by being curious, by being learnable. I think high energy to me is someone who's curious, who wants to know more, who wants to learn, and ends up learning, soaking in the learning. Right? I know of people, and we've had silver hires as well. So we have a very diverse population. We have silver hires, we have very young people. And I see that there are so many senior people who have retired or semi-retired, have the energy to learn and to be curious.
To be relevant.
Yeah. Today, my team of average age in their 20s and early 30s is being coached on AI by someone who's in his 50s. Now, he had the energy to learn, but he's, and then be curious. And now he's talking about AI to a much younger generation, right?
Yeah,
but to me, that's energy. Right.
And that actually covers proactiveness also.
Absolutely.
Because, if you're curious, you're
be ahead
going
of
to
your
cover
curve.
both.
Absolutely. Be ahead of your curve.
The other two words is, ego and insecurity. Purvi. And I feel in the corporate world, at least, I can't comment for, people who are starting on their own or whatever it is. This is like the fundamental emotion that plays out in every human interaction. And it takes various forms. I mean, some call it politics, some call it whatever it is. It takes various forms and shapes in the entire journey of life. So when you go take on a client to do a leadership development or to do a cultural shift or an organizational shift, do you face this, and what is your feedback? How do you handle it? Is one. Second part to it is, how do the youngsters of today be cognizant of something like this when they're stepping into the...
So again, my take on ego and insecurity is this, that they're good for you. Okay. As a person who works on behaviors and as a person who works on behavioral sciences, I think ego and insecurity are always seen in a negative tonality. That's not the case. Ego and insecurity need to be channeled the right way, right? So to my mind, insecurity is not just about you versus me and are you better than I am, etc. But insecurity is about saying, how can I do better so that I can be at the edge? So take insecurity and create that insecurity into a motivator, right? And if you are feeling insecure and fearful, be insecure or fearful about, will my work be good enough, right? You don't need to be insecure about, is someone taking what is due to me, right? As managers and as leaders, they have to make sure that the system is fair and just, right? So that people who are insecure know that, hey, I'm scared or I'm worried, but the system is fair and will take care of me, right?
So important.
It's very important. And I think it's important for young people to also trust the system, to not constantly second guess that, oh, is somebody going to get something more than I am? I think that's important. Coming to ego, I've seen the negative and a slightly demonized version of it as well. But I think for the most part, my view is ego is good because otherwise there will be easy acceptance of failure. If you say that I have no ego, convert ego into pride. Pride in my work, pride in what I present, pride in what I do, pride in how I interact with people. So make ego about that. And as a leader and as a manager, if you're doing that, then you're in a good space. And for a young person, not to make ego about you versus me, but to make ego about me versus me.
Wow, powerful. Yeah. Thanks. Thank you so much for that, Purvi. You must have met so many leaders, across the 30, 40 years that you've spent in this space. So what are the attributes to a leader? To me, I have found that a people's person generally becomes a good leader. Is that a right analogy? Is that, is it simplifying it too much?
Again, from a behavioral perspective, I don't agree with that at all. I don't think you need to be a people's person to be a good leader. I think you need to understand people for sure. And if you just hate being around them, then there is a little bit of a problem. But I have seen, for example, a lot of people say, oh, this is a gregarious leader and they're always around and joking and so attractive to people, but that's again form versus substance. A leader must have substance and not just form, right? So coming back to that, I think a leader needs to be able to do 2 or 3 things really well. The one is attract teams. You attract them, and I might go into that a little bit deeper. The second is inspire them. You don't need to be in the middle of everything, being that cool and happy and gregarious person all the time. It helps to do that sometimes, but I think what you should be able to do is inspire and motivate people. How do they feel Do they say, I want to do this one day. I want to be in this person's position one day. I want to be this person one day. How does that happen? And finally, organizing and orchestrating teams, bringing the right people together, making sure that they are delivering, and therefore there's a sense of purpose and achievement for them. So as a leader, if you're inspiring talent, you're attracting your teams to your business or your company, and you are organizing and orchestrating them, you're in a good space. Leaders need to also recognize that it's when you bring in teams at any level, and I say this unabashedly, whether you're starting out in your career or whether you're looking at a second career after retirement, people are looking for three things. They're looking for a career trajectory and career growth. That's most important. The second is a safe space to work, where I can make mistakes, take risks, and I can still be forgiven if something goes down south, right? And I think I was just talking to a client the other day, and they were talking about creating a safe space. And I was saying, how much risk appetite do you have for your leaders? And they said, yeah, sure, we do. And I said, okay, what will you invest in a project that's likely to fail and allow for it? And there was stunned silence because it's all right to talk about risk, but not about investing in it and investing in failure. So I think people like safe spaces where you can take risks, you can survive through those failures and still emerge as everything is fine. And finally, apart from careers and safe space, I think what people want is respect. If you can't give people basic dignity and respect, the way they see respect, and it's not your perception of respect, it's their perception of respect, then you will not find yourself as a great leader. So you may be a people's person, you may be very friendly, but if you aren't able to give people the respect they desire, or the safe space they desire, or the career graph that they desire, it won't make you a great leader.
Absolutely. So we've had a lot of conversation around human capital. So, this is an extension, but we're going to try a lighter format.
Okay.
This is the interviewing format where I'm going to ask you the standard set of questions.
Okay.
You can either term it redundant or relevant.
Okay.
If it is redundant, you can choose not to answer. If it is relevant, guide how the interviewee has to answer that.
Okay.
Okay. So number one, and an all-time favorite, what do you know about your job and the business that we are going to be doing?
Very relevant question. I think it's a great question. And for those who are going for interviews, must do their homework, must understand the company, must read about the company, must definitely have visited the website, maybe even gone and researched some of the key people to understand. And I think that's very important to know.
Yeah, it's a huge put off if they haven't done
people
the
have come and said, I have no idea. It just, that's a big no-no. So definitely don't do that.
Okay. Yeah. How do you think AI will impact your role in the future?
Relevant question, or a good question, because that's a question that everybody likes to ask these days. From an interviewee's perspective, I don't think there's any right answer. No one knows, right? I don't think there's even... but I think it's important to have a thought process around it. So you don't need to have the right answer. There is no right or wrong answer, perhaps. But you do need to have a thought process of what AI is going to do to your business or your role or your work, your domain area, etc. So
you need to be informed.
You need to be informed.
And
you need to be informed, and you need to have a thought process. You need to have thought. I think we sometimes take a lot of data and we're very informed, and we like to give a data dump sometimes to an interviewer or to somebody at the other end. But it's important to have a line of thought. It's important to say, where is this going? And that has to be yours. It can't be somebody else's. It can't be ChatGPT's. It has to be your line of thought.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Why did you leave your previous organization?
It's a fair question. My submission to all those who were interviewing Be honest about it. Don't go overboard bad-mouthing the organization. I know we have platforms today and you go onto Glassdoor and you say what you want, etc. But, show a little bit of grace for a company that has employed you before. So talk about what was your motivator to leave the organization, but don't go overboard critiquing it too much.
Very valid. What is your dream job or a dream company that you want to work for?
So I think it's a bit of a trick question, not particularly relevant in today's times. But if you were to be asked what's a dream job, my suggestion is don't go down very specific. Sometimes people say, I want to be in your competitor's job. And, I think be open about what you want to do. Maybe keep it a little more general, keep it more about the kind of roles you'd like to be playing rather than drill it down to absolute specificity. Not for anything else, because your own goals and dream jobs will change. So you don't want to say, this is what I want to be, because sometimes the company may select you on that basis, that this is what you want to do. And if you decide to change stance somewhere midway, you're boxing yourself and you're pushing yourself into a corner. So be open, but just keep it a little more general.
Absolutely. I notice a career break. Do you want to talk about it?
Sure, please, absolutely. That's a great question, and please do talk about it unabashedly, why you took the career break, and be again open and honest as to what happened. I think, and if a company appreciates the honesty, they'll find that a great answer. If the honesty scares them, then maybe that's not a company for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Do you have any questions for me?
Yes, I think, again, good question. And as an interviewee or as someone who's going out there to get a job, while you're doing that research, which is non-negotiable in my view, you will have some questions and you can ask questions. Preferably keep it to role, keep it to the company, don't go down again very specific on individual things or individuals, but ask questions that will come off as you're thinking about your future here rather than you're thinking about yourself and how good it will be for you. Just not about that, but just about your future.
Beautiful. Last is, what is your current CTC and what is your expectation?
My suggestion is, if you're going in for an interview, sure, talk about what your current CTC is and be very sure that you've seen that before you've gone for an interview. A lot of people misquote their own current salaries because they don't remember. And that there's no other put off than that. When you come back and say, oh, but I have a few lakhs more here and a few lakhs more there. That doesn't go down very well. So be very clear on what you get paid, how you get paid. You have incentives, you have ESOPs, you have something else. Be sure to talk about it all in your meeting. If you have a number in mind and you're very, very keen on that number, sure, talk about it as well. I always advise, especially at mid and senior levels, to say that think of your career first, the numbers will follow. But if you think that the numbers are set in stone, sure, mention it. If not, my advice is don't. Let them come back and then you have room and opportunity to negotiate. If you say, I want a 15% hike, and what if the company, and this happened to someone I know, that he said, I think a 15% hike over my current would be great. And the company came back and said, oh, but in the band that we were planning to take you, it's going to be a 40% hike over your current. So, it was just a very funny conversation. The company was honest enough to say, we're going to still give you the 40% hike. And he said, oh my God, I shouldn't have said that. But so try not to be too specific if possible, because you always have room later on when the process is on to negotiate a bit. Absolutely. But in an interview, it's a bit.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Most
Purvi.
welcome.
I think it comes from so much experience that kind of shown out in that. Now moving to your impact area, and I think the versatility that you have built into your career that comes from all of this, that we also at VWP deeply admire, Purvi, honestly. And so the first thing that I want to touch upon is your mentorship programs. I think you run 2 of it, but obviously because it's the We Women project and License to Lead, Seems like such a wonderful platform that you're putting in place for women leaders. At what level do you take them in?
So they're at women leaders who are either in sort of senior CXO, CEO kind of roles, or one level below that, and maybe sometimes two levels below that as well.
Okay.
It's senior women who've been in a leadership role, some sort of a leadership role already, so they understand some aspects of leadership. So it's meant for women leaders.
And how did this come about? Why did you choose to do this? How did this come about?
So, during COVID, we were not doing very much, the first wave of COVID, and Zoom calls were new. Right. And in my bid to innovate and do something different, I said, I'm going to do a few Zoom sessions, invite some speakers I know globally to come and speak, and invite clients to attend. So I would invite speakers, very senior people, somebody from London, somebody came from New York, somebody from Singapore, some from India as well. And I would send out invitations to clients. And I used to keep it as a limited seating program. And people would be calling me constantly and saying, can we attend, and, add one more seat, etc. What I did notice was that women did not come forward. So out of 35 seats, we'd have maybe one woman and sometimes no woman attending these sessions. And they were free speaker sessions, learning. It was all out there. It was online. But that's where a certain realization dawned on me that women don't put themselves out there. They sometimes wait to be invited. And that became a challenge for me. And that, coupled with the fact that my mom had always talked about challenges she faced in her journey. And, she said, I would love to. And she always, in all her programs and all the work that she did, she always had room for women leaders and to help them and to work with them. So I said, let me combine all of this and let me bring in a program for women leaders. I said I'm going to just do it during COVID. So I did the first program in 2020. It was 12 women leaders. It was a great program. And I thought this would be it. But they told me that, look, you should continue doing this. This was a great session. And so I started my second one. I thought that would be my final one. This morning, I just inaugurated our 6th session.
Congratulations.
And 130 women will go through this program.
130 women.
130 women would have gone through this program by the time we finish the 6th cohort. So it's a passion project, really. A large part of the proceeds of our program go to a charity called St. Jude, which is childcare centers for women, for children with cancer. The program itself is meant for women leaders, like I said, a safe space for women leaders. It's a sisterhood that we've built. And even today, whether it's the first cohort or our last cohort, the 5th cohort, the women leaders are all friends. They're a very, very tight group. Some of them also mentioned to me that they have made long-lasting friendships here and very intense friendships through the program, because every Saturday they come together and they're with each other.
That's wonderful to hear.
Yeah, it is.
So wonderful.
And some of this, like I said, I just wanted to create a platform for women leaders to come together, and some of these have been great fallouts of that. More than 50% of the women leaders who've been through the program have had some enhancement in their careers, either joined a board or a bigger responsibility or a new job. It makes me very proud. And I think what makes me most proud is that it has transformed quite a few lives. And for me, that was, that hits the chord.
Yes. So are there any threads that come up 6th cohort? So, are there any consistent threads that come out in terms of challenges or in terms of successes?
I think for us, the common thread has been to inspire, to bring about authenticity, to bring about resilience. I think that's been the common thread that we strive for. I think the common fallout of this has been that it's got women leaders to think beyond themselves, also beyond their reference set. As women leaders, we have a reference set. These are women leaders we hear about from the corporate world. These are leaders that we've learned from. These people have been our mentors. But you go a little beyond your little reference circle. And I think for every leader, and I can say this for all 130, I think, that there has been some sort of eye-opening that has gone beyond, because we have speakers who come from different realms and talk about their lives and motivate them. That motivation has, I think, been really a great thread across all our sessions. And the other is talking about business. All our sessions on business are around business issues faced at a leadership level. Things that don't get talked about in your job on a regular day, right? So whether it's compliance and governance, right? That's not something that comes into the realm of every job. But what is governance at every level of a company? Very important to understand. How does ESG play a role? How does sustainability play a role in your job, in your role, which may or may not be directly linked to ESG? So how does that happen? How do you make sure that that's being talked about at levels down the line? So I think talking about things that don't get addressed in your day-to-day work life is the second common thread that I see. From a negative perspective, I'd like to believe there's nothing negative. I think the one thing that I wonder about is how much of this do we pay forward? I think everyone loves to learn. We enjoy such a program and we've got tremendous feedback. In fact, we had so many testimonials, we could not put them all in our brochure because we just have such gushing, long testimonials. But I just hope that women remind themselves that you've got to keep paying it forward. You've got to do this, create the same safe spaces for your colleagues, create empathy for other women as well, create career trajectories for other women. Are we doing that? Are we not doing that? I don't know. It's a question mark to me.
So wonderful, Purvi. Yeah. When I spoke about threads, obviously, I wasn't judging license to lead. What I was trying to understand was these women who come on these cohorts, do they have, is there a common benchmarking, or is there a common sense of grief? Is there a common sense of belief patterns? Like I often say that, gender is only in the mind, maybe. Is it only the baggage that we carry? Is the world really gender agnostic? You've met so many of these women right now. Where do you see it all come together?
So I think leaders of all kinds carry baggage, right? We all carry a burden of some baggage. It could be male or female or any gender, right? And it could be anything from your education to your gender, right? I think from a women's perspective, the world is not always gender agnostic, right? I think we've gotten closer to it than we were before. Let's say at the time that my mother started out, we've come a long way. But this morning we had a speaker who talked about how in the line that she's in, which is outside the corporate world, posh as a concept doesn't exist, that women cannot, there could be so much sexual harassment, but they aren't able to fight out.
There's no forum.
There's no forum, there's no platform, they can't address it. So I think we've, in the corporate world at least, come much closer, right? But there are things that are unique about women. We're socially conditioned. It's about what you've been told, being brought up, of what you need to do. And I think there have been a lot more woke parents now than there ever before. Right. So parents have inspired and empowered their daughters and to go ahead. But yes, there are other social pressures. To attend an event or to be seen as someone. And these are also pressures that women sometimes put on themselves. But am I seen as the good daughter-in-law, the good mother, or the good wife, or whatever role it is that you're playing out? And I think those are some of the common themes that come out. Also the superwoman syndrome,
Absolutely.
right? That's a theme that want to do it all, right? We have these sessions where we don't sometimes bring in a speaker. We only have the cohort talking, and women talk about it, and slightly younger women talk about, I have a child and I'm just had the baby and I'm also torn at work, and then I have these other things, and then there'll be slightly senior women who've got older children say, don't worry about mom's guilt. Everybody has it, but deal with it. But you don't have to feel guilty about mom's guilt. So those are some of the common themes, and they're very beautiful when they come out, when the cohort talks to each other. We've had lovely moments where somebody came to us and said, she presented this to the cohort saying, I want to close my business down. And, I can't deal with the pressures anymore. My daughter's in class 10, da, 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 da. And the cohort sat and actually analyzed her entire business and said,
goodness, Purvi.
Yeah, it was amazing. And this was all organic. I mean, it wasn't something that I asked or it just happened in the conversation. The people who were doing marketing talked about what the marketing angle could be. The finance people talked about the finance angle and said, look, hang in there. The business is going to do better. You'll be fine. Lo and behold, her business is doing really well. And touch wood, she didn't shut it down. So I think those kind of themes that come, and then just that power of sisterhood is beyond tremendous. That's what gives me so much satisfaction, really.
I mean, I'm getting goosebumps as I hear this, but yeah.
It's amazing. We've had women talk about their personal vulnerabilities. We've had women break down in some of these sessions. These are all leaders, very well known, acclaimed in their fields, but open out, and that has been the common thread, the safe space that we created, and talk about the challenges.
Talk about it. Who do you go to,
right? Yeah. Who do you go to? And the fear of being judged.
Absolutely.
Or the fear of not being understood, that tension between personal and professional, etc. But here are women who've probably been through something similar and have something to offer there. It's been fun.
Thank you, Purvi. I think this sounds extremely inspiring. And I don't know, maybe I might land up in one bed because I'm so...
Love to have you.
The other aspect that stands out in your trajectory is, of course, your board participation. You're on really large marquee company boards. You chaired the NRC at so many levels. So how did that journey start? And, how do you pick these organizations today?
So my journey, again, there's a lot of things in my life. And as I'm talking to you, I realize are quite serendipitous. And I have so much to be grateful for. So my first board ever came from a company that I was consulting with. This is also my mother's first client.
Oh.
And so they had, like I said, they had gone away and then they came back, and the chairman asked me to help him with a particular project, which I did for a couple of years. And then after that got over, we were still in touch in general. And one day he called me up, and I remember exactly, I was at an airport in the US, and I was catching a flight, I think, out of New York. And I got a call from him, and I was wondering why he'd called me. It must have been late in the night. And he said, I'd like you to join my board. And I said, say that again. And he was saying it, and I remember jumping up with joy. And that's how I joined my first board, which taught me a lot. And thereafter, some options came to me more organically. Like I said, people who knew me, people said, okay, you're on a board. And similarly, some others I had worked with came to me. And then some others who knew me came and said, look, here's a role that you should look at. So all of these happened more and more organically. And there were many offers that I didn't take on as well. And what I look for, and you asked that question, there is something that I can contribute to. I don't want to, and I say this to the first meeting that I do with either the chairman or the MD or whoever I'm meeting, saying, look, I'm not a silent board member that you can have. I want to contribute, and I will want to actively contribute. So if you're looking for someone who's going to be a rubber stamp, then I'm not the person for it. Or where I've seen boards where I feel like my contribution may or may not be right now valued or may not be relevant, right? So then those are not boards for me, and that's where I've turned down a few as well. But for me, contributing and learning, where I can learn something about the business, and it's been fun. The boards I sit on are very diverse, really very diverse. We have an engineering product and a consumer retail business and a healthcare business and a chemicals business and a cement business. So they're very, very diverse. But I've had a lot of fun learning. In some cases, the company is a leader and in whatever it's doing, and in some they're the challengers in what they're doing. So how do you position? I'm right now serving on 3 boards that are companies that are looking to go public. They're going to go listed. That trajectory and that journey is very different. So it's been fun.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And now going to step into your happy kitchen. It just sounds so happy, Purvi. The name, starting from the name, and I did go into your Insta page, and I saw all the yummy food pictures.
Snacks for you from the happy kitchen waiting for you. Probably gone a little cold by now.
Looking forward to that. But how did it start? I mean, that's just so amazing. I mean,
so I've always enjoyed cooking. My family is a big foodie family, and my mother used to cook very well, and I used to enjoy the kitchen. I used to love spending time in the kitchen. My grandmom used to be a great cook. So foodie family, food was always on our mind, and then cooking was always happening in the kitchen. So there was always a fragrance of food wafting through our, and we've kept some of those legacies alive. Actually, you were talking about legacy and I was saying values. So a few years ago, actually, I was thinking about myself, and I was rethinking about what was my purpose and what was I trying to do. And I said, all of this is great, but what else can I do to contribute? And I said, look, I love to cook, and I love having people over home. I continue that legacy again of my parents, of having people over and doing all of that. So how can I take my cooking and make it into something that's more meaningful to society? And that's where, and I was already doing some work actually with St. Jude, and we were doing it professionally, like, from Shilputsi, we were helping them hire some people, etc. And I knew the people behind St. Jude very well. So I said, hey, I can bring this together. Let me raise money for St. Jude by cooking. So, and that just, and I remember I was not feeling very good at that time. I was feeling a little low and down. The moment this idea came, I felt so happy. So I just called it the Happy Kitchen. And so the way it works is that on weekends, since it's a weekend-only gig, that I cook for parties and for dinners, 2 to 22 people. I send the food over.
You're in the kitchen.
I'm in the kitchen. I do it myself.
Wow.
I cook myself. I make the menu myself. I curate the menu myself. And the menu is curated. So I've added a little bit of my HR piece to it. So I curate the menu based on the profile of the guests. So I've done a party for an 80th birthday party to a marathon runners party to and then based on the profile of the guests, I'll make the menu. And I cater, I send the food over. I request my patrons to donate to St. Jude for that food. So I will tell them this is they pay me for the cost of ingredients, and the rest of it is donated to St. Jude. So I don't get anything for my time or time spent. And that's how the Happy Kitchen works.
So much hard work.
I love cooking, though. I have to say that's where I think I get my best ideas. That's where I think I'm at my happiest. I'm at my happiest. I mean, the other day I was telling you, I got back from Geneva. I got back home at about 5:00 from a very arduous journey because of the war and everything. The flights were delayed, etc. And I got back, and after I freshened up, I said, I didn't feel like just sitting down. I went actually into my kitchen and I cooked for my family. So for me, cooking is therapeutic. No, it's just therapeutic.
It's just kitchen, right? Any license to lead is also a lot of effort.
Yeah.
Ascendancy is also a lot of effort.
Yeah.
Shilputsi in its own must be. So nobody can complain.
A lot of energy.
Nobody can complain about lack of time. I think if they see. No, really.
That's what I learned. Like I was telling you at the beginning, that the boundaries that my parents also had were like this. You know, you're also cooking, you're also working, you're also doing something. Many a time I've invited my colleagues over and we're doing a review meeting while I'm cooking for them sometimes. Or, we'll go somewhere and we'll have lunch and we're having a good time. We've even done, a spa afternoon together and then talked about work while we're doing it. So you kind of, blend it all in.
And then there's work and life and everything happening together.
Yeah. It's good fun. It's good fun. In fact, I think initially my husband used to find it a little disconcerting, saying, you're always talking about work, but he realized that it's all one and the same for me. Yeah. My work, my home, my everything else, it all blends in. So I'm constantly in that zone.
Very inspiring. Truly very inspiring.
Thank you.
So before we wind up, we have a quick rapid fire.
Okay.
We'll start with your favorite food from the Happy Kitchen. Your favorite menu you curated.
Okay, my favorite menu. My favorite menu is always what I call the pantry cleanup. So I have a pantry full of different herbs and different spices, different oils, different things. And of course, when I curate menus, I have to sometimes buy additional things, but sometimes I just cook from what's in the fridge and what's in the pantry. And that, to me, is my favorite menu.
Fabulous. Favorite book?
So there's a book that's a very old book, actually, written a long, long time ago. I think it was published in 1989, if I'm not mistaken, by Warren Bennis. It's on becoming a leader. Okay. And I think, the underlying theme is that leaders are not born, they are made. And the concepts that he talks about have always, from the time I read that book, and I still sometimes go back to it, still resonate. So for me, that's a book that's had a lasting impression. Okay. But there are so many others that are just...
what's one underrated leadership trait of quality?
Authenticity.
And the last one, if you weren't with Shilputsi, what would you be doing? I think I know. I mean, there's too many things you would be doing. But
that question someone had asked me once a long time ago. It's a great question. I think I'd be doing multiple things and I would have gone from one thing to another. Probably, I think, trying to change the world one moment or trying to change a menu another. But I think perhaps been a chef. Perhaps learned how to cook and
taken this multiple.
Taken it more seriously and done it in a more technically savvy way.
But you're an inspiration to carry forward passion, really. And one go-to question of yours when you're hiring someone?
Tell me your story.
Beautiful. Powerful.
I tell my team this all the time. And since you were asking about my philosophy, apni kahani chhod ja, kuch to nishani chhod ja. So for me, that's really important, that whatever I do, and authentically, leave a story behind, leave something behind for someone to hear of the next day.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Lovely meeting you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to yet another wonderful episode from VWP. It gives us enormous pleasure to create this content for you. If you enjoyed listening to the conversation, please hit the subscribe button and do let us know your favorite moments from the conversation. We would also love to hear if you have any guest recommendations for us. Of course, please don't miss our shorts section where we have our favorite moments compiled in bite-sized formats for you. So keep listening, keep growing, and do subscribe to the We Women Project. This is your host, signing off. Thank you.